Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Doing well, and ready to go.
Yes.
And there is a little good news out there. There's not quite as many people dying from government messing around. You know, that's what somebody should do someday, is sort it out. People die from this stuff. Some people died because they had a disease and it was a combination of things. Sometimes it was medication and government controlled the medications, and sometimes it's just government regulations. They ought to figure out how many people can they find that had nothing else wrong and it had no problems with getting medication at all versus, the complications. And all of a sudden they'd find out, well, even the numbers are coming down. For New York, they got into a bit of a mess, talking about, the thing that the governor did on forcing some of these people back into the nursing home, and a lot of them died, and it was not very good publicity for him. So, but he reported that the deaths are down. He probably had to cover himself a little bit because he got bad press on the other. So now, but they are down, and if you sort it out on how many people, how many people will be marked down as coronavirus that didn't have it because they've been instructed, this stuff we talked about, just call it coronavirus, we get a better reimbursement. But there was a report out today that there are 5 governors who have forced nursing homes to take these patients. And it's New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Michigan and also California. Those governors did it. And those are generally suspect, some not as much as others. But anyway, the governor said you can't deny them. So that's their idea of civil liberties. You can't deny anything to anybody, especially if it's going to monkey around with a government regulation. And yet at the same time, what was going on here is it was a struggle to get the government out of the way. So I assume what happened here is the governors, came along, the market was saying, we want these patients in here. They have the virus and they're positive, and we want them in. And the nursing homes didn't want to, so they get a government edict to force them to do it, which means that somebody with some common sense and in the marketplace making a non-government decision was trying to say, hey, we read something about the elderly or more prone to it. And the elderly probably don't have many people to defend themselves. And so they were forced back into that, and it wasn't good. So I think it's an example of the private market and what would have happened if we'd had no government management of this. It probably would have worked out pretty well. They quickly would have found out through common sense on what they should do. But who knows how many people that were told that they had to be admitted to these nursing homes. We just know about New York. I mean, it was a disaster up there. So government interference, every once in a while they'll have a regulation that actually accidentally does some good, but government regulations don't work. And besides, when they do work, how can they prove that the private market wouldn't have done the same thing? They can't ever take credit. So I think there's a lesson here, and also there's a lesson to the people who live in these states. Stand up to these governors, and some of the mayors are starting to. So this is an example of learning that maybe the private sources will be able to handle this better than the government regulators and the fascists of the world. This which side I'm on that one.
Yeah. Well, I think this is really an unreported or underreported scandal. And we showed, thanks to Bob Wenzel who put this up, we showed the tweet from this fellow who looked into it more. But, at least these 5 states, and he says he's looking into more, forced the nursing homes to take in patients that had tested positive for the virus, who were sick. And we've talked about it on the show before, that some of them, they transport the patients back with body bags. I guess that's more convenient. You save some freight. But this is a big scandal, and when you look at the numbers, it's an even bigger scandal that people should be screaming about. 35% of all U.S. deaths from coronavirus occurred in long-term care facilities, 35%. And this is a New York Times piece from May 10th, updated on May 10th, which is yesterday. In 15 states, the number of residents and workers in nursing homes who died from COVID were more than half of the total deaths in that state from COVID. So more than half of the deaths in 15 states were in nursing homes. This is a huge scandal that nobody is talking about. It is a talk about the war on the elderly, the war on the weakest part of our society. And all the while they're doing this, they're basically killing older people. They're saying, oh, we've got to lock down the country for everyone's health. Even one death is not acceptable. Well, they're causing thousands of deaths.
You know, and the question is why do the people go along with it, and how do they accept it? And I think it's back to this whole issue of what's been going on here is based on fear. They build up fear in the community, and I'm sure they said, look, these people, you know, could be infectious, and this is a quarantine. This is a wise government quarantine. We'll put them all in there so they can't go out and cause the spread of the disease. They put them in there and they get the disease. So, but the people have to be fearful of it. So the families get fearful, and the patients get fearful, and they say, well, if this is the best thing, and it turns out it was the worst thing to do. But if you, as we go through the various things, and as we have in the last several weeks, it's usually so often based on fear. Scare the people, you know, about what's going on, and then they'll roll over. And, you know, if you don't do this, you know, you could die. If you don't do this, you're going to have no food. If you don't do this, you know, the end of the world will be here. And that is happening so often right now. Because of the failures, I see this glimpse of hope, because if you want to be concerned about what's happening, you have to become more fearful of government rules and regulations. And we don't give those rules enough question, and the people go along. One thing is they have the force of law, and then you have these fancy organizations like the CDC and WHO, and they come in and they tell you, you know, what is so important, and their ulterior motives are never mentioned to us. So the people go along with it. But I bet you, if we went over all the things that we have talked about, there's an element of fear that they talk about, scare the people into it. But that might be the way all incremental socialism and fascism works. You know, you've got to do it. And right now, the biggest thing, and I've talked a lot about this, and it isn't in the Constitution. The role of government isn't there to make us safe and secure. It's there to protect our liberties so that we can have more people making a decision that would have been much wiser for these nursing homes than going along with authoritarian governors who say, we know what's right, and we have to take care of you, and we're going to scare you. If you don't, you're going to get sick and die. And they go along with this. And it's in the news. It didn't even get in much in the news. You said you didn't see much on it. They don't even get the coverage of it. So hopefully this will wake people up, you know, because at this point when things fail, they just hide it. But if people know about it, you know, and when we talk about all these things on the cost in life and the cost in money, and if it isn't working, and we've used that example so often, whether it's foreign policy, why is it that when it doesn't work, foreign policy warmongering doesn't work, and this social warmongering doesn't work, why don't the people have a much greater desire and understanding that you're not better off by the government taking away your liberties and taking care of you? It's the worst thing in the world you can do. It's called totalitarianism, and what does Bob Wenzel call it? And the people who gravitate to doing it, they call them power freaks. And that's what they are.
It's a form of terrorism, really. I mean, if you look at the term, it's to terrify people for a political goal. And I think that's what we're seeing here more and more. But the media does stoke fear, and I think we talked about it earlier. There's all kinds of, just when it calms down, they talk about new ways you can get sick. Now it's through your eyes, through your ears, on the surface, everywhere. Something new comes up. And the media plays such a huge role in this, Dr. Paul. And I clipped a couple of things this weekend from the New York Times. If you go to the first one, this is their weekend briefing. They'll tell you everything to think. This was yesterday. Actually, it's this morning. Weekend briefing. And here's what they had. And let's go to the next one. Here's what they said. This is what they say to people like us, Dr. Paul. Climate deniers and some conservatives are promoting fringe claims that the death toll from the coronavirus is being inflated. They're finding an audience in the White House. So we who listen to the people themselves, Dr. Birx herself said, call everything coronavirus. We've heard it over and over. People who repeat what the experts say themselves are being called climate deniers and basically flat earth people. Using the word denier, it's a pejorative. It sounds like Holocaust denier, you know. So if you actually think that they're inflating these, as we've shown so much evidence over the past couple of weeks, they're inflating the numbers, well, you're just as bad as a Holocaust denier.
Now, you mentioned about the eyes. Do we have that picture that we can show?
We didn't have the picture on it.
It's a picture I saw today, and it's an individual with his mask on, and his hands are over his eyes like this because, you know, fear. Oh, I didn't know I could get it through my eyes, so I'll do this. Well, it is a little bit crazy about that because there's no evidence that, infectious diseases that go to your lung are inhaled through your eyes. Yeah. You know, it doesn't happen that way. And the ophthalmology organizations, they've all, have not pushed this and said, no, there's no evidence for this. And but putting your hands over your eyes, it made me think of. They don't even want to hear or see the truth about what's going on. Don't tell me what's true. You know, it's my eyes, but it's fear. I don't think that one's going to get too far. Let's hope, because if we all have to put blindfold on and protect our eyes,
you're
like
driving.
Oh my goodness! But there's another thing going on, and we see it every single day: fumigation, wiping down. You know, having perfectly sterile conditions. With medically and scientifically speaking, you can't do it, and it probably does more harm than good because there's bacteria and viruses all over the place there to help build our immune system. Oh my God, you can't do that. Yeah. But that is it. You have to have a good immune system, and that's why people elderly or sick, they don't have it. But normal people can build up their immune system, but they're exposed to some types of organism, whether they're bacteria or viruses. One thing is there was one article said that we need to wipe very carefully and sterilize everything because you might, and they use the word might, you might end up getting coronavirus from it. So they have this scandalous fear-mongering article, but they will put in there, we're not saying it will, but it might be. So very often they're like that. Yeah, it might be a lot. It might be helpful.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably as close to being true as it might be harmful in that you get your virus because something's on this table. And I think there's that they always resort to fear economically and war and now health-wise.
And if you go to the store or anywhere, there'll be the hand sanitizer station, and people are lined up for miles to put that stuff. And I'm not a doctor, but it seems to me your skin is an organ. Your skin does absorb things. You know, who knows what kinds of chemicals are in some of these sanitizers? People will, I got rid of the corona, but I got cancer in my hands. You know, so it's scary. But,
right.
But, you know, there's one thing that we want to bring up because this is important. And this is something the media won't want to talk about. We've talked about Sweden a little bit. We've talked about other countries and other states. We've talked about South Dakota, which has done a great job. But here's something that they don't want to talk about. 2 weeks ago, the governor of Georgia, the state of Georgia, said, you know what, we're going to open up. We see a leveling off, and we need to open up the state. Trump at first had good instincts. He said, that sounds great, do it. But then he got nervous, or maybe Fauci started yelling at him or something, and he said, no, don't do it, don't open it, don't open it. It didn't dissuade the governor, it didn't dissuade Georgia from opening up. And so 2 weeks ago, the media, of course, and the politicians, everyone was condemning this idea. You're going to have a spike. You're going to go through the roof. You're all going to die. But let's look at the numbers. I got this off of the state of Georgia's own website on coronavirus. If we can look at the next one. If you look what happened there on the right side where that line is, when they reopened, it didn't spike. In fact, it went way down. It basically cratered. It flattened completely. And this is with the state more or less completely opened up. So there's a real example there, and it goes against the narrative that they want people to believe.
there are a lot of different things that can make the infection get worse and it more contagious. And there's some things like natural immunity are very beneficial that we have to deal with. But there was one study, and it deserves more testing and more study on this, but it came out and said that if you had received the influenza vaccine, that you were more likely to get coronavirus. And everybody's mandated practically, orchestrated that, you're almost like an American if you don't get your flu shot. I mean, into the millions of people who do. And of course, we end up still with some of the reports are there's more people dying from influenza than they do from coronavirus. And yet it's never mentioned. It's always, right now you better be scared. Because you could die from this. And therefore, you have to listen to Fauci because he's brilliant, and he also is mixed up in the manufacture of vaccines, and are good medication that can be used, and vaccinations aren't absolutely bad because I've told people that when I was in high school, I was sort of glad that the polio vaccine came. Because by the time I got to medical school, I never saw a case of polio, and yet there were a lot of people that we knew of and heard about back then. But that is pretty rare, when we're talking about what they're doing. Get rid of some medication like chloroquine. Don't do it. It's bad. And then say, we want to get you a vaccine. And there's going to be big bucks made. And all of a sudden you have 100 companies, racing to get this done. And if anything, I think it would be, if somebody comes up in the next month or two or something like this, I think it would be one of the most dangerous things. That, boy, I wouldn't want any of my family taking this vaccine, especially under these conditions. I don't like a lot of them. I don't like these cocktails either. That doesn't sound, scientifically wise. But I would think that to rush to, and that's what people are taught. They're scared enough now that they're just waiting on the vaccine, and so much good is going to happen. When the vaccine is here, we might be able to get back on airplanes again. Prove you took the vaccine, and then you can get back on your airplane, and maybe you can go to the movie theater. But until then, you better get your tattoo that you've had your injection and you had your vaccination. And of course, that scheme is weaved through all of this activity, is those who want total control of individuals. And there is a bill now in Congress by Rush that wants to do that. He actually wants to, trace people and probably satisfy Gates.
I was going to say, speaking of tattoos and the mark of the beast, here's a bill, H.R. 6666. Wonder if that was an accident. Bobby Rush. It's got quite a few co-sponsors, and someone alerted me to it a few days ago, and I thought, I've read a lot of legislation. Sometimes it's easy to misinterpret what's in the legislation. So I looked at it with a pretty cautious eye, and it really is pretty much as bad as they say. It's first of all, it's called the Trace Act. So that in itself is pretty scary. Testing, reaching, and contacting everyone Act. And the everyone is not a mistake, I don't think. They want everyone to be contacted by the government. What it does, it awards $100 billion to eligible entities to basically go around. And here, I'll just read you this first part, Dr. Paul, because this tells you what the whole point of it is. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, acting through the Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, may award grants to eligible entities to conduct diagnostic testing for COVID-19, to trace and monitor the contacts of infected individuals, and to support the quarantine of such contacts. So basically, this is $100 billion. First year, yeah, you're right. Because subsequent, and I looked at the bottom, such sums as may be necessary for the subsequent years too. So a lot of money for mobile labs to go around and test everyone. Oh, got you. You got to stay in your house. got you. You got to stay in your house. They are not giving up on this stuff.
You know, a lot of good people, libertarians and free market people say, well, this is happening. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to stop it. And we see these people doing this, and it doesn't make sense. And it looks like bankruptcy is going to come, which we're in the middle of the declaration of the bankruptcy. So they do this, and some people will say that's just their method, and they're going to have more control. But you know, it may just backfire. Bankruptcy can hurt a lot of people, and maybe they'll turn on and say, who did it? Oh, it was all these people who had these false promises. They were going to take care of us from cradle to grave and give us $2,000 a month, and if that doesn't work, it's going to be $5,000 a month, and it's just on and on. But because it won't work, the big question is, who gets blamed for this? And there's a chance that there's enough people left in our country will say, you know, that's why we delighted when people were saying enough is enough, like the mayor in Ocala, Florida. He said enough is enough. He says, I'm not going to enforce any of these laws. And let's hope that he doesn't get overridden for this, because they're out there. There still is a spirit there. And it has to be ignited, and it has to expand. I hope it spreads, you know, so that more people will understand this. But people are easily intimidated, and they listen to the fear. So our message has to cancel out the fear. If you don't want to be fearful, think about accepting a market approach to the nursing homes. You know, you shouldn't be fearful of the alternative, which wouldn't have been that this was a government program that literally had a lot of people die in these nursing homes. So, no, there are some good messages out there, and hopefully that people will realize what I'm looking for is a positive with this thing they're doing, a program like this, $100 billion a year and whatever they need. It's not going to work, but maybe the people will say, you know, like they're sick and tired of looking at their house. I want to get outdoors. I want to get outdoors. So maybe they'll say, hey, look, this was pie in the sky. Whoever believed that they could give us $2,000 a month or $5,000 a month and we'll all be happy? You know, there's a historic thing. It's historic, even biblical. You know, you're supposed to work for what you get. You have to work to take care of yourself. But that is not what they wanted to hear, because we have been so wealthy. It's been so, we have been blessed with what was the result of a lot of freedom. And we've been living off that. And now we're living off the future promise of that returning. But that's why I think we're reaching a cataclysmic climax of this. So that's why it's so important that we get people not to be fearful. The fear is the unknown and the stupid ideas. We should realize that. But you don't need to be fearful if we have a growing number of people that know that there's an easier answer to this. And it's a terrible thing to think. Freedom, I don't know how to handle freedom. What does that mean? You know, it means that you have your life back.
Yeah. And you asked earlier in this segment who's going to get blamed for this. I think to a big degree Trump is going to get blamed. You see the people that are fed up, that are hardworking people that are out there, a lot of them have Trump flags and Trump stickers, and that is Trump's base. I think he could have showed some better leadership on this. I think he could have stood up to people a little bit better. I think he, again, unfortunately, listened to some really bad people. And as we see now, and we haven't even talked about this, maybe we will sometime this week, but this Obamagate exploding, showing the collusion behind the scenes to basically overthrow the Trump presidency from the beginning. There's a lot more to that. So with that, of course they're using this to make Trump look bad, and he kind of is not seeing it like he should. And not that we're support or don't support, we're just trying to observe what's happening. But you also mentioned businesses turning on government, businesses getting fed up. Well, I do want to end with, I found a good picture, a happy picture to end with. This is from a place in California. I won't say exactly in case they get in trouble. If we can look at that last picture, look at this, Dr. Paul. This is a company. These are the signs. They're not supposed to be open. Here's the signs they had in front of their store. We're open to the truth. No masks allowed. Handshakes okay. Hugs very okay. So this is great. This is something that can cheer us when we see a business owner saying, I'm not going to play this game anymore. I'm done with it. I've had it. So that's something we can be happy about. If you look in the description to today's show, there's a way that you can sign up for free updates from the Ron Paul Institute, which this show is a part of. We will certainly never share, give away, or sell your name. It's just a way of keeping in touch. This is an era of increased censorship. Nobody knows what will happen tomorrow, but we would like to be able to keep you posted on what we're up to and send our thoughts out to you. Not very often, but occasionally send them out to you. So if you can go ahead, in addition to subscribing to this channel, sign up for updates from the Ron Paul Institute. That way we can all keep in touch. And thanks very much.
Very good. I want to mention a case that comes from California. It doesn't have as good an ending as yours has, but it's in Fresno, California. The husband wanted to take his wife out. Obviously, they didn't have kids with them. He was going to take her out for breakfast, which went yesterday on Mother's Day, and they got there, and I think he waited for 2 hours, and finally he was ready to finally get his breakfast. And he was patient enough to do this, which I wouldn't have had the patience, but he was. But as he was getting there, the police came and said, "That's it. Close the doors. Get out of here. And you don't have any right to do this. And even if they want to serve you." So it was still locked on. That's why we have to bring these two people together, the people that stand up and take a little risk. There was always risk in taking a position of freedom. And that's always the toughest part, because one way or another, even if you don't have the government authorities, it's almost as bad as when you have these do-good other people want to turn you in. Well, I obey the law. I put my mask on. I cover my, oh no, they don't have to do that. Yeah, I just cover my brain, and you have to do it too. You have to be an idiot like me. So this is really a shame. There is one analogy that I've made that I think is interesting, because I remember the story about Howard Hughes, and he was one that built the biggest airplane ever, the Spruce Goose, and it still exists if you want to see it in California. But he always had a bit of problem with germs, but the older he got, the more fanatical he got. And this is no dumbbell. He was brilliant and a good businessman and very, very wealthy. But he had this thing about germs. And as time went on, he became fanatical. He was just, out of control. And I keep thinking, could our society be Howard Hughes syndrome? Because everybody's going nuts over this thing. And if not, his ending wasn't so sweet. He had all the money, but he became so obsessed with this that he did the opposite. They said he ended in filth. He wouldn't bathe or do anything, but he never died from any viruses, I guess. But no, it was really a sad story. And I think his life almost gives us a hint of what our society could be like. So I'm hoping that we can find a better answer than the Howard Hughes syndrome answer, because that was not such a good answer. And the answer is simple. Why don't we have it where the government just leaves us alone? If they want to do something for us, just give us a little protection for our liberty. Don't intrude on our liberty from any government level. Don't start any wars that we don't need. Don't counterfeit the money. Let people make all the voluntary transactions they want, whether they're financial or social. Boy, that is amazing. Well, it wouldn't have been too astounding for Thomas Jefferson and a few others. They sort of hinted that that's what they believed in and tried to put it into the document, but nobody follows the Constitution anyway. But anyway, I still am hopeful that people will wake up, because I've met them and we know about it, and we're in communication with so many with our program, and they communicate with others. So we hope that you will join us in this effort to promoting the cause of liberty and bring some sense. We don't want to go the way of Howard Hughes. It wasn't a good idea. But I want to thank all of you for being supporters and tuning into our program. And please come back to the Liberty Report soon.